It's the JB Show, and it's your life by design.
Let's talk about Purposeful, what's behind it, the energy you put into this. Particularly, I think I shared with you the last time we had a sit down around radical inclusion. How I felt about, not just me, that was the thing that, entire Sierra Leone felt that girls who were pregnant
shouldn't go to school,
shouldn't be allowed
in class,
because it was bad influence.
Correct.
It was bad influence, amongst their colleagues. Now, mix this together with Purposeful, and say how did this come to be, and that was super radical.
Yeah, the idea of Purposeful is rooted in my story. As I said, I was raised by a single mom. I've got two sisters. And Purposeful came because of Ebola. I was now working with the UN, and then when Ebola struck, I tried to come to Sierra Leone, and they tried to stop me, and I didn't like being stopped because I said, this is my home. And I was threatened that if I came back somehow, when I went back, I would not be allowed to go to work, I would be banned, and I just thought that was unjust. So I quit my job, and I got invited to work for an institution called Population Council that was focused on trying to solve emergencies, and particularly on girls. So this was something that I really wanted to do. So I built that portfolio. And then at some point I realized too, this institution, Population Council, is an old institution, very well established by the Rockefeller money. It's one of those big institutions in New York. But I wanted to do it in a different way. I had a vision of what I thought was missing in terms of girls, combining advocacy with program and building an institution that is rooted in Africa, that's not colonized. That the idea that somehow sense, aid, resources only flow in a unidirectional way from the West to us as recipients that we're used to, the NGO and the white man encounter. I really wanted to change that. I said, there is an opportunity here, we can create something different. So I partnered with other folks, and I was one of the co-founders, came up with this idea of starting a Sierra Leone Africa-rooted organization with global ambitions. I used the contacts that I had and the resources that we had, and we mobilized. To start Purposeful, we had $3 million in the bank. We had raised about $3 million. And we did that because, again, I've always believed I had a boss when I was at the Population Council. Her big idea to me was, ideas lead, money follow.
Ideas lead, and money follow.
That's it. She said, she also has a big idea as a woman. She's like, she always had a big idea. And when you're listening to her, you're like, Judith, where's the money going to come from? She's like, don't worry about the money. Let's get the idea right.
Idea leads, and money follow.
The money
follows the idea.
The money will always follow. So I always believed in that. So we had this idea. We had initial disappointment, but then we had $3 million in the bank. We started, but I really did not want us to just be like another one of those small saloon pockets NGOs. We had big ambitions. We wanted to give money. We wanted to take money and move money, not just in Sierra Leone. You mentioned over 150 countries during COVID. We expanded. We bought and took over other global other global NGOs are based in the UK. Purposeful became the home of it in Sierra Leone. We have bought a building here. I bought a building last year, over $1 million. We built it. I think it's one of the best places in Sierra Leone to work. It's a very accessible building. We invested in it. We invested in people at Purposeful. That was something I'm very proud of. That's why I like to tell people, as you said, I love this job. It's the greatest honor of my life to be asked to serve, but I didn't come here because I didn't have something. Purposeful, we raised over $50 million. We were by far the richest national NGO in this country, by far. In terms of endowments, in terms of resources, we had money. And we were moving money not just here, but across the world. But again, this is the point about ideas leading. We had a clear moral compass. To your point on pregnant girls, it was an issue that for me was so clear. It was a symptom of bigger problems of the patriarchy. The problem of how we treat girls, of how girls are abused and then left to basically suffer the consequences. And we use a moral lens to judge them for the very abuse that we have subjected them to. And then take away their future. The one thing that could help them to get out of that abuse was education. And then we say, hey, first, the state says you're not supposed to have sex before 18, and if you do, you're being violated. So therefore, that girl who is pregnant is already a victim
of some
a
violation. Yeah.
But what's the one thing that is the ticket to her life outside of that violation? It's education. And then you ban her
from going to school.
From going to school. And the ban is so overwhelming. It says you have done something bad. It judges you. It says you're not allowed here. It says you are bad. So it stigmatizes and diminishes you. It makes you feel like you should be ashamed of yourself. And by the way, nobody ever got pregnant on their own, except Mary, the mother of Jesus. Apart from her, everybody else. So, but there was no recourse to
the context and who. Yeah.
So for us at Purposeful, it was clear that this is an issue we will use to fight and advocate to address the bigger issues of what Purposeful was formed for, which is for the liberation of adolescent girls. And it was a perfect issue because the ban had been put in place because of Ebola. It was clearly not thought through. Dr. Bar was the Minister of Education. Whenever I got them to argue with me, I knew we had the argument on our side. And so we started this big national conversation in this country. We had so many back and forth. At the time, I was living at home with the current chief minister. He was the education minister. Well, first he was head of DSTI. He was in the middle of this big debate. And I was posting, I was the face of that campaign. And then
did he get it? Did he get it at a point in time?
And then they made
how long it took David to get it?
Look, from when David was in the US before we came, he was with us. But he was not a public champion of the issue.
Okay.
He was never against pregnant girls going to school. He just thought it would never be accepted. At the time, he was trying to play a politician, and he was a politician. So, but he was an internal advocate, and I knew that the arguments. I knew we had him on the argument. I just didn't have him yet on the public commitment. So, everybody knew we were close friends. The day he was announced as minister, I went on Facebook and I posted. I congratulated him and I said, with David as minister, I know now that this draconian ban will end. And so people said, oh, I'm making it impossible for him. I said, yeah, I'm going to put him on the spot. And we did put him on the spot. And we worked with him. He set up a task force that he made Purposeful chair of on the particular issue of this pregnant girls ban. And of course, we did the research. Again, that's the thing about the way we did our advocacy. Because we had the resources, we did the research. We did the studies. We could show, we could really demonstrate, and we got the voices of girls. We sued the government. Many people don't know this. Purposeful took the government of Sierra Leone to court, the ECOWAS court, and we won. We partnered with other people, and we won that case. But we were not relying on the ECOWAS judgment alone. We were also engaging. And when, after Dr. David Senge's Ministry of Education, in fact, he asked us to draft the press release when he finally convinced Cabinet that it was time to end this ban. We drafted that press release. The Ministry of Education, released it. And then we started working together with him on the policy of radical inclusion. Purposeful was the lead author of that policy. I've never really said that publicly, but we wrote that policy and we handed it over to the ministry. But that for me is how advocacy is supposed to be. You champion a cause that is now owned by government, and then the government takes it forward. It's never about personal glory.
Yeah.
It's always about what's the cause. And that is the goal here. If the goal is about getting pregnant girls into school and challenging the stereotypes about girls and challenging the patriarchy and making sure we fight for inclusion, it's not about the glory I get. It's about that.
I'll read something at the start to that. Then we'll go to the last lap. We would have to have around 2 of this. What it says, I'll read something you said to me. We've been, like I said, this has been coming for a long time. Yes. And each time we sit inside, we meet, I'll push you around. But you shared something with me. You said, you don't create sustainable change by investing in the people with power and trying to change their mind. There's no evidence of power giving up power voluntarily. The evidence is you build the power of those without it, and then they can challenge the status quo. And you're not Minister of Information of
Well, I think I have the right ministry for that quote. I absolutely believe in that. And that's why I like to say I'm still an activist in government. I still believe in people power. We're trying to pass certain laws. I continue to say to the activists.
So you still believe in people power?
I absolutely believe in people power. I believe that the only power that is real power is the power of the people. I believe that those of us in governments who get the privilege, extraordinary privilege of sitting in cabinets, we're human beings. And the idea of power, I always believe power is an intoxicant. You and I, you can have good intention and good things.
Yeah, once you get to
power is a drug. It's a potent drug. It has the capacity to ruffle you and to make you become something else if you don't have the right moral compass and the right systems around you. I love the story of all the big accomplishments in the United States, and they tell the story of how President Johnson, who was, reputed to be one of the most progressive presidents in America, he will meet with the activists and say to them, I agree with you, now go make me do it. Go make me do it. This is what we did to David.
Okay.
We had to make him do it. We knew he was with us, but we had to organize. We had to show. We had to do the evidence. That's people's power. That's how that's how democracy works. And that's how democracy has to work. It's not the idea that we've elected our leaders and we just let them go and they just do what they want to do. But the real power is if you can hold them accountable. Show them that you want to hold them accountable and demonstrate that, hey,
a government minister cannot be talking like that. I mean,
well, His Excellency made me Minister of Civic Education.
Okay, so civic education is part of building awareness.
My job is to build awareness and consciousness in citizens and say to them, be part of democracy, be part of governance. Believe in your power. Believe that you can make the change because this country belongs first to you. My kid likes to ask me because, since he was born, I was always my own boss. So now I turn to him. He says, oh, Dad, you have to go out. I say, yeah, because my boss calls. I said, but Dad, I said, who's your boss? I said, Madabio is my boss. He says, so Madabio is your boss. So who's Madabio's boss? I said, you are. My 7-year-old. I said, you are Madabio's boss. That's how it works. You are a citizen. You're young, but very soon, Madabio is supposed to be working for you, and that's what he does. And that's how the equation has to work. But I think oftentimes we forget that. Because in the power politics, we centralize the people who are in the room and not those for whom we are supposed to be in the room. And that, for me, is something I try not to forget.
This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design.